Ladies and gentlemen, though I suspect that a number of you are neither ladies nor gentlemen, but I mean that as a compliment, since what passes for ladies and gentlemen these days is anything but. But, well, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Alfred Cromwell. I am the founder and president of City Tutoring. And I bring you this message because I was just thinking about this recently. I was going through my papers and thinking about what it means to be educated, because it's a word, the word educated is a word that is thrown around so often these days. And ironically, by the way, I had no idea that this topic about that I'm going to be speaking of today sort of appeared in the New York Post in the form of an editorial about the failing math standards that are no surprise. This has been going on for years in America, but the New York Post acts all surprised that the math standards have fallen. I was actually, after reading that editorial, I was debating whether to speak about this specifically or that editorial. I'm going to speak about that editorial in another video because I didn't want to make this video too long. Otherwise, people accuse me of going on forever. But if you'll allow me to drag before you a matter that is of relatively serious importance, and it is the curious and persistent ignorance with which our society presumes to define educated or education, and the equally curious disregard it shows for a lot of the young people who, either by temperament or mischief, do not fit the pre-approved mold. So I have not come here today to deliver the usual middle class, the sterile middle class message about diligence and working hard and the American dream and grades, or the importance of raising your hand in class and being polite. That's not the concern today. Really, those matters are for the unfortunate children of suburbia, the future managers of mid-tier offices at best, although AI will probably replace all of those types of jobs. We'll see. But their lives glide predictably from internship, then to spouse, and then to a 40-year mortgage. And I suppose our really reprehensible neoliberal system really does want those types of men and women. It makes sense because neoliberalism thrives on obedient little workers. They are cogs in the machine. Really, they don't. It's meaningless. You see, if the owners of America today, all these alien owners, foreign owners, really, if they had their way, you wouldn't even exist. You are a necessary burden or evil that they must contend with because they cannot really they still cannot go out and say that they want you dead. Although we did see that the other day, by the way, on Fox News. I can't remember his name, but a commentator, some of you will know. You let me know in the comments if you know who I'm talking about. He was discussing the homeless crises in I think in American cities, but specifically maybe California. And I don't think he meant it as a joke. He said really just to kill them. Um, if I remember the name, I will link it, but I don't remember right now. But you see, the type of people who are attracted to city tutoring and truly do well really are the type of people who make the normies, and that's a very good word, the normies. We used to call it just normal people, average. If you're the type of person that makes someone, the normies, sigh heavily whenever you enter the room, then you probably will like city tutoring because you don't fit into the mold. Because you come from, a lot of you, if you're watching, you know that I'm talking about a lot of people at city tutoring. You come from a lineage of free men who did real things, such as tame lands and establish a Christian civilization in our Western lands. And I'm not just referring to the Western part of the United States, although that too. I am referring to the Western countries in particular. Our ancestors fought for God and country. But all of this came to mind because I was remembering, as I was going through my papers, I keep all my papers from decades ago. I was remembering a rather unpleasant exchange, and it occurred years ago at a certain libertarian institute in Washington, D.C. And so I decided to re examine those themes for the benefit of my current audience. Um, By the way, side note, those of you who participated in the poll, on the community post poll, about clothing, thank you for that. It's still open for those of you who want to participate. It is something I do find those things fascinating, and I was rather encouraged. I don't want to say what the results were. I was rather encouraged by many of the comments and the results that I'm seeing. So you need not worry, because I will be discussing that probably next week at some point. The issue of dress in young people, and how so many of what we consider to be proper is really not proper. And I don't mean that in the sense that you think, but you'll see next week when we discuss that. But anyway, during the discussion that I had in that libertarian institution, it was really an unpleasant and pointless discussion, as often those discussions are. Um, so there was a young man of Asian descent, but specifically Oriental, and although he was very suburban, Americanized Asian in his mannerisms, and he declared confidently to me, "You know the problem with you." By the way, for context, we were discussing the issue of charter schools. I oppose charter schools. And he said, "You know the problem with you. You're a nationalist and a racist." He said those words as if though I was going to somehow feel bad or something. I don't know what his intentions were, but usually when they use those words, it's to make you feel bad. But I just kept having my coffee calmly, peacefully. But the reality is, he said that the only reason he said that because he said the reality is that the only reason America wins math Olympics often is thanks to Asian immigrants. And then he said, while white people are all failing in most states, and he said to drag everyone else down. He also said that whites were drug addicts and all sorts of compliments. And but anyway, he offered this remarkable insight. He was trying to defend the issue of why parents ought to flee the public schools and go to charter schools. And let me say, for context, by the way, again, he considered himself to be a libertarian, a free marketer type, really a mercantilist scoundrel without a country, as our ancestors would have seen someone like that. His point, if one can call it a point, was that public schools suffer because those kids, you know the ones he means, because they lower the educational waters upon which everyone's little boats must float. And yet there's something in this tidy narrative that simply does not sit right. So let's walk together, you and I, through a few simple observations. Because when I pressed him further, he said that most whites and blacks in America are uncultured. And really, that was the source of his critique more than anything else. And so I thought of situations in my own academy and my own experience. So I was thinking of the experience in my own academies, because I have had young people, for example, whom the self appointed arbiters of respectability would have long since delivered over to reproach. Some of them have had very real transgressions, yes, um, and many of them would have earned the title of problematic, at least, or troublemakers, they used to call them. So yes, indeed, I have had students, for example, who occasionally even feature on court dockets. But really, when a society offers you so little, the most convenient way out is, for others, is condemnation rather than reformation. And it is a sign of our uncaring, unchristian current society. But yet, Providence, God that is, with customary irony, has endowed our free minds with their own talents and faculties. And much of the troubles behind problems in the classroom have to do with disinterest. You see, the problematic students, they know in a strange sense um, that he cannot describe that it is all really rather pointless and has been for a very long time. So I, however, have had occasion to see that many of them do have math abilities specifically, and they are brilliant in that regard. And if you teach another subject, I am sure you have also seen that they might shine in your subject and be a troublemaker in another class. A great deal of trouble comes from lack of interest. That doesn't justify necessarily the bad behavior, of course. Those of you who know city tutoring, you know we do not put up with nonsense. But we need to understand the root causes of it. So naturally, of course, all of this spectacle offends the local upstart H1B aristocracy, those delicate souls whose refinement depends chiefly upon their own description of it. They might murmur, because they never speak plainly, that maybe some of our students are uncultivated, by which they mean that he has maybe not studied the polite trivialities by which they distinguish themselves from the common clay. Um, I should be astonished, in fact, yes, if he has ever so much as opened some of my students, even the Federalist Papers, except perhaps to hide a speeding ticket within its pages, if at best. Nor do I imagine that many of our students have endured the cultural mortification of attending some kind of pretentious concert where retired dentists and others they sing ballads beneath trembling chandeliers. Because here stands the delightful paradox. In America today, it is very likely, listen to me, young people, in America today, it is very likely that those who are dismissed as unfit for polite company are in truth more fit for the Republic's needs than the entire congregation of pretentious careerists who sneer from a safe distance in our awful and alienating large cities today. I always tell visitors to our country that you will never see the real America in our large cities, which have been entirely taken over by corporations and their cheap bidders. And by the way, those of you who were fooled by Donald Trump, that's on you. Because he has been dining with billionaires abroad and taken an interest to what is happening over in other places far more than what happens in America, as the country continues to rot from within and we are crumbling as I speak. And so we have to ask ourselves, what precisely do we mean by educated? Are we evaluating the person or the education? So let us refine our inquiry. Does educated refer to, number one, does it refer to the quality of the institution one attended? Two, does it refer to the quantity of information memorized? Or three, is it the ability to perform well on standardized tests, assessments? Or number four, is it the presence of a sharp, independent mind? And so if we judge by current abilities, then many graduates of prestigious, so-called, I don't call them prestigious, I wouldn't even call my own university where I went to school. I never say I went to a prestigious school. I just say I went to a name brand school. But it's prestigious in the sense that it's famous. We'll say it that way, but not my definition of prestige. Um, but if we judge by current what we see today, well, then frankly, it's an educational disaster. And if we judge by memorization alone, half the nation would qualify as cultured, though they cannot reason their way through a simple system of linear equations. You know, we have to stop And I say this to the young people because oftentimes you are grounded in fantasies, and you think that all previous generations were more intelligent. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. There's a lot of much older people walking around who are just as uncultured, or even more so, I would say, in many ways. It is not age necessarily that gives you wisdom, but the right attitude of mind. You can find someone who is 60 years old and acts like a child, and you can find someone who is 20 years old and acts properly. And we have a striking generational contrast, though, because it is true that older generations have been more knowledgeable in dates, names, wars, and the like, the general culture. But they were often paralyzed when asked for an opinion. Not so much in the United States, because we've always had a tradition, or we used to have a tradition of free speech. But I am saying, at least free inquiry. We used to have the constitutional idea. But this was not the case everywhere. And they trembled in many places at the idea of disagreeing with authority. And I am speaking specifically, of course, of the 20th century. And today's youth, by contrast, they possess fewer facts, but in some ways, you are infinitely more daring, though useless in other ways. So nobody really wins. Don't pat yourself on the back so soon. But many of you know how to speak, but you do not always know how to think. And that is where mathematics enters the stage. Because we have to reject certain false definitions. So allow me to discuss several fashionable misconceptions. The first misconception of today's society is that it has to do with the time spent in school. So, more hours in a building does not make you more educated. In fact, they might often make you more bored. The second misconception we have is that employment as proof of learning. So it is fashionable to equate education with job preparation. And this is crude and unworthy of a thinking society. We all know employees, some in very high places. Um, they might be polished in appearance, but they are abominably shallow in intellect. In fact, recently, and this is no joke. I wish it were. I wish it was. It would be less problematic if it were a lie. What I'm about to tell you. I was speaking to a psychology professor, female, a little bit younger than me, and we were talking about a whole list of issues, and I mentioned the word protagonist, protagonist, and sadly, she had no idea what the word protagonist meant. She said, "What's a protagonist?" By the way, this is not a foreigner. English is her first language. She's American. Very scary that a professor doesn't know a basic protagonist versus antagonist. And there she is. She's a director, by the way, of an entire department. I wish I could give out names, but I cannot for legal reasons. But I think some of you will not be surprised at what I am saying. And no, she's not a DEI hire either, because if it were a DEI hire, then I can understand a lot of things. But no, she's standard, run of the mill, nothing special. Well, maybe because I don't know if she was hired based because of her gender. That I don't know. But she's not a DEI in the sense that we understand it today. Uh, then we have the idea of examinations, which is what the New York Post article, by the way, fails miserably at understanding. Because high test scores only reflect test taking ability, not wisdom. And every instructor knows that students who understand deeply, and they might yet test poorly, and there are those who ace tests but understand nothing. I've had people who score perfect on the SAT, and they are buffoons, idiots, idiotic, uncultured. It does not impress me at all. It might have impressed me when the SAT was an IQ test. It used to be actually an IQ test, but not the SAT today, which has been utterly, it's a joke today. The fourth misconception, I think I'm at number four. Sorry if I lost count. Memory, memorization. But that's really the worst, one of the worst misconceptions, because memorization is divorced from reasoning, and it produces the dullest of human creatures. I think it was the English philosopher mathematician Alfred North Whitehead. I think he once said, "A merely well-informed man is the most useless bore on God's earth." So a man may graduate with honors and yet be incapable of original thought. A man may earn a prestigious degree and yet tremble before the simplest moral questions. And a man may memorize all the presidents of the United States and all the wars we've had and yet have no idea how to navigate his own life. So, what then have we educated? A parrot? A clerk? A bureaucrat? Maybe, but certainly not a free man. So, what kind of people then are attracted to city tutoring? In general, the types of people who do well at city tutoring are not really your standard ambitious types. What I mean by ambition is, uh, if you're interested in, Harvard this and some sort of formulaic career path, this is not the place for you. Because we attract people who possess a curiosity that is really the seed of genuine intellectual freedom. And it is really that type of mind that today's educational system, that is obsessed with rubrics and conformity, attempts to suppress, and test scores. But mathematics, the true mathematics, pure mathematics, not the standardized worksheet carbohydrate that schools feed students, we welcome such a student, because mathematics is not the art of memorizing formulas. Math is the art of thinking. Math is the great equalizer. For all of you who talk so much about equality and you have no idea what the word means, because mathematics is really the only subject that treats all men and women, yes, equally. It cares nothing for your background, nothing for your accent, nothing for your grammar necessarily, although you do have to write properly for your proofs. But it doesn't care whether you were raised in a suburb or a shack. It doesn't matter whether your father is a lawyer or disappeared years ago. In mathematics, the only currency is thought and truth, being right. And who really, in a way, I don't want to give the wrong impression, but I often say I'd rather have a troublemaker than a conformist, because mathematics attracts the troublemaker. Because it's not the art of plugging numbers into formulas. It is not test prep. It is not the memorization of steps. Mathematics is a kingdom of thought. If you are of a rebellious mind, you might find yourself at home, because it's built upon real math. Again, it's built upon questions, doubts, why nots, whys, what ifs. And of course, the famous, "I refuse to accept this unless you prove it." And tell me, what group of young people excels at that attitude? It's certainly not the polished honor students who fear offending the rubric. It is really the type of people who want to question things. The ones who suspect correctly, especially today, that most things are pointless, that the whole system in America is really rigged. And I'm not the only one who says that, by the way. Even the president acknowledges as much. System is rigged, although he should know better than anyone else what that means, because he is a beneficiary of the corrupt system we have in America. So what we stand for is really, that is the foundational philosophy of city tutoring. And I often have to say that on this channel because many of you are confused. You think it's just a test prep center. It's not. And so at city tutoring, we do not indoctrinate. Uh, it's not about stuffing young people's brains with lists that they will forget within a week. And we do not worship state standards or corporate assessments. We reject them. Instead, the pillars that we defend, we really cultivate 5 intellectual habits. The first thing is inquiry into empirical facts, not believing something because a textbook decreed it. We also use induction as a reasoning tool. The second point is perspective, understanding from what point of view an argument is made. The third thing is connection. You have to be able to see relationships between ideas. The fourth thing is inversion, asking what if the opposite were true, right? That is important. And the fifth thing is relevance. That is understanding why a problem matters in the first place. Those are the qualities that produce thinkers, not drones. We want to produce creators, not memorizers. So we have to conclude this because I need to go on a walk. I have nothing else to do today. Thank God. But we have to conclude this with the simplest distillation of all. A truly educated person is a free person. And you are free because you can reason. You are free because you can challenge error. You are free because you can detect lies. And if you're a Christian, you are free because you can detect heresies. And you are free because you can think independently. And mathematics, more than any other discipline, teaches the mind how to do those things. So if you people watching this, maybe you're half amused if you've gotten this far, or half indifferent, if you believe that school has nothing to offer you, I can assure you school may not, but mathematics does. Because math belongs to us. Reason belongs to us. The intelligence belongs to us. Freedom belongs to us. They are God-given. And because of that, we don't care about abilities necessarily. People of all abilities join city tutoring because we have no fetish for the so-called gifted or the Olympiad warrior in math. So if you share the philosophy of our institution and what I am saying, please subscribe to the channel. And I always appreciate you, those of you who subscribe. I try to keep up with so many of the comments. I always enjoy the comments, even the ones that are hateful. I do get hate comments, but that's to be expected. It makes no difference to me if it's a hateful comment. If you think it has an effect on me, it doesn't. You're wasting your time with the hate. It doesn't. It doesn't even as so far as make a dent to me. But some of you try anyway. But anyway, the vast majority of you are positive people, and probably later today I'm going to address specifically the New York Post article because there's a lot to say about that as well. Thank you all.